Welcome to this week's Rider Support.
Today we're going to talk about why amateur riders seem intent on throwing away gels, bars, wrappers, CO2 canisters and just generally ruining the environment. We're going to talk about the rise of AI coaching. Should you have an AI coach in your pocket? And finally, how you can set your training zones effectively. But before all that, Pogačar, is he clean? Is he not clean? Let's find out.
Anthony.
Sarah, what's going on?
Not much. We've a lot of questions to get through today. Some really interesting ones. They're coming in thick and fast, as per usual. And I'm going to start off with a difficult one to answer, I think. Well, maybe you have a straight answer. Here we go. Anthony and Sarah, come on. Someone has to ask the question, given Tadej Pogacar's performances, not only in the Giro, but all of the time, is he doping? And that's from Daniel.
It's pretty bad that anytime you get performances out of the ordinary in cycling, these questions are never too far away. Is Pogačar doping? I've never heard anyone saying Pogačar's doping. I've heard people, pub talk, is Pogačar doping? Come on, he can't be clean. But I've never heard a rider suggest that he isn't. And, I chat to guys on the podcast every week, coaches, riders. I've never heard a whisper on air, never heard a whisper off air that Pogačar's doping. Armstrong is a dirty word in doping circles, but he had a quote years ago saying, extraordinary allegations demand extraordinary proof. And I kind of think like that about it. It's not a reverse burden of proof. Pogačar doesn't have to prove that he's not doping. No rider has to prove that they're not doping. You need to prove they're doping. It's a burden of proof, not a reverse burden of proof. And I think that's important. So unless somebody fails a drug test, they're not doping. It's black and white. There's no grey area with it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, playing devil's advocate, I don't think Pogačar is doping. And I think maybe that's more of a...
That's just because you met him and you're friends.
Yeah, I think it's more of a, I'd be so devastated if he is, if eventually, even in 20 years or 30 years' time, it comes out, testing, moves with the times. We're able to go back and test previous samples and suddenly find out a whole raft of riders.
It sounds like you listen to some sort of crime CSI podcast. They're going back to test DNA.
Yeah, it's
I
like
don't know
DNA.
if they do that with dope testing.
Yeah, maybe not, but just if they did, let's say for Pogačar went back and in 20 years' time come back and test Vingegaard, Pogačar, all of these guys who are amazing, Mathieu van der Poel, Wout van Aert, if they go and test all their samples again and find out they're doping, I'll be absolutely devastated. But they've given us so much entertainment and so much love for the sport in this era. And I think you're right. We have to look at it at face value until we're given any other information. That's kind of the way I look at it. I don't know if, and I'm, reading the cycling publications day in and day out. I know they have to be obviously very careful about what they write. I never even really see a sniff of that. It is just
you can't speculate around dope and read. I know we're doing it right now, but we're answering a question. There's you either have proof that someone's doping or you don't. There's no grey area really for speculation. We've seen 10 years of L'Equipe speculating that Armstrong was doping. It's he hadn't failed any test. Well, actually, he had failed a couple of tests, so it was maybe
warranted.
There was some justification in it. But the testing is getting better and better and better. I'm not saying there's zero doping in cycling. There's definitely a number greater than zero in the pro bunch that's doping at the moment. But I don't know, just to accuse somebody of doping because they're dominant, it feels like intellectual laziness.
Yeah, I agree. And look, we're going to see it. It was the exact same about Jonas last year, the year before. Everyone was saying he was completely lit off his eyeballs, and again, nothing has been proven. So
Pogačar's numbers are big, but they're not he done 7.7 watts per kilogram for 5 minutes, which it's not unheard of.
Really?
It's not. That's not a number that no one's ever done before.
Okay.
That's a number that's very much within the realms of possibility for potentially the greatest rider ever. That's who we're talking about. We're talking about Eddie Merckx's numbers here. Pogačar may be the greatest rider ever that we're watching right now, and 7.7 watts per kilogram, I can't do it. Grant Thomas can't do it because he tried to follow, but he can. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I think, look, everyone will have their own opinion on this, and whether you like or loathe Pogačar, he is, as you said, the best rider.
Everyone likes Pogačar.
Yeah, he's amazing. He is absolutely class.
Okay, maybe question 2.
Next question. Anthony, why do all the team members on a team time trial wear the same helmet? Should they not be fit for each individual? And that's from Josh. That's such an interesting question, isn't it? Because when you go into the aero tunnel or do aero testing, your body shape, your frontal drag, all of that stuff determines what aero kit suits you best, what position, what helmet. So why do they all wear the exact same time trial helmet? Okay.
Yeah, it's really
money.
Easy. The Danish track team, which are the best, or one of the best team pursuit teams in the world, they all wore different time trial helmets for the last Olympic Games. I suspect they'll probably use different time trial helmets again for each rider, but they're not sponsored as a federation, I don't think. The World Tour teams are all sponsored, so it's not like, Ineos can show up in a Giro helmet, a Bell helmet, a Kask helmet. Like, they need to be all Kask helmets. They need to be sponsor compliant. Within that, you do see sometimes a team that will say, I don't know, Pogačar and Rafa Majka have been wearing different helmets for a lot of the Giro d'Italia in the road stages, where one is optimized for aero and one's optimized for ventilation. And that's just a function of their roles within the team, because Majka's going to hit a lot more wind during the day than Pogačar is. Pogačar wants more ventilation for the finishing climb.
For those hair tufts that stick out.
For that Instagram moments. But yeah, no, it's a good question, but I think it's just an easy answer. Sponsors is
it's money,
lad. The fast answer.
Okay, next question. Hi, Anthony. I recently saw your post on Twitter where you snapped a picture of a discarded gel wrapper on the road. I feel this topic needs some airtime, as I'm seeing more and more littering caused by cyclists. I've been cycling for 20 plus years and I've never seen such disregard for the place as cyclists nowadays. Gel wrappers, tubes, CO2 canisters, just thrown on the side of the road in well, it's somebody else's problem now attitude. It's revolting behaviour, and that's from Shane.
Shane, don't sit on the fence.
No, there's no real question there, Shane. I think Shane just wanted to get that off his chest. Yeah, we see it.
Yeah, there's a lot of people cycling. There's a lot of people driving. Is everyone driving a good driver? Is everyone cycling a courteous road user? Respectful of the environment? I don't think they are. It's the same like you go hiking, you go camping. Some people are brilliant at leave no trace. Other people just ruin a campsite. They leave litter all over the place. I don't think it's any different when cycling started out, or at least when I started cycling. I go out training on a Saturday, and any person you see in cycling, you knew them. Like, the community was that small that everybody knew each other. So the idea of where you'd wave at each other, it was obvious you'd wave because you knew the person was. It was your friend. You're waving to say hello to one of your friends. And it was easier to keep, sense of we're all in this together, community, we don't have a bad reputation. Have you ever heard of Dunbar's number? I can't remember exactly what the number is for Dunbar's number, but it's this theory that beyond a certain point, I think it's like 49 or something. That's, someone will correct me in the comments, let me know what the actual number is. But it's beyond this number, say 49, that it starts to break down. So you can have 49 in a community, you can have 49 in a group, and you can form effective friendships and bonds, and we feel like we're in this together. But beyond that number, those bonds start to break down and you don't have a connection. That's why we're quite, at least in urban areas in Ireland at the moment, we're quite detached from our neighbours. We're quite detached from the community because we've exceeded Dunbar's number. I think that's what's happened with cycling. We've just exceeded that, and now some people are just, it's attracting people that aren't as community orientated or, environmentally aware.
It's really surprising, isn't it? I mean, it's kind of, you just, okay, so when I see when I see a gel wrapper on the ground, I think that came out of somebody's pocket by accident. I always do, because that can easily happen when you're pulling something else out of your pocket. Yeah. If I see a tube or a CO2 canister, I'm like, oh, that dirty.
No, that can happen as well. Because Alex Howes actually sent a DM on Instagram in response to that picture, because I think I had it up, on Twitter. I think I had it on Twitter. And he said that he cleans up the trails quite a bit, and he's noticed that there is gel CO2 canisters on the pump sections of track where they're actually just falling out of people's pockets.
Yeah, which is fair enough.
That can happen.
It can happen. I think that if a tube and a CO2 canister are on the side of the road, on the grass verge,
on a wall or something.
On a wall, that's just some lazy SOB. And it's just like, bring home your rubbish. You've carried it around in your pocket for the last year and a half when you haven't needed it, or you've had it in your saddlebag. just put it back in and dump it when you get home?
Well, I said it to a lad in a race. He took a gel out in the race, took the gel and threw the thing away. And I said, put the gel wrapper back in your pocket when you're finished with it. And he said, I can't, my fingers are too cold. I said, how did you get it out of your pocket?
Get it out, exactly.
He didn't have an answer.
Of course not. Anyway,
he did have an answer, but it wasn't related to that.
Okay.
It was telling me to F off.
And you couldn't say it on the podcast. I think as well, if you see people doing it on your group spin, it has to be called out. If I saw it, I don't think anybody on our group ride would do this. But if they did, I would 100% say that. It's just absolutely disgusting. Shane, I'm with you. Absolutely.
But I was at the traffic lights the other day and there was a car stopped and someone threw out an empty can of Coke out the window.
Oh, yeah,
like it happens all over society. It's not just cycling. So yeah it's not nice behaviour, but also there's some cyclists that aren't that
Do
nice.
better. Do better, everybody. Yep.
Hey Roadman, excuse the short interruption. I love riding the bike, but on account of being so busy with the podcast at the moment, I'm now what's called a time crunched rider. I never thought I'd see the day. But I have a tool. I'm using Wattbike to keep myself sharp and on point with specific sessions to maximise that available training time. I have a Wattbike Atom right here in the recording studio beside me, and when I have an hour in between interviews, I jump on. It's removing all the friction points for me. There's no more 10-minute setup, unfolding legs, banging my knees off stuff, getting my hands dirty, the usual connection issues. It just works every single time. The Atom's perfect for virtual racing as well because it has crisp gear changes, it has 1% accuracy, and it has max gradient capability of up to 25%. If you're looking for an indoor trainer, I honestly couldn't recommend this any higher. I've been using a Wattbike since 2013. Honestly, it's the last indoor trainer that you're ever going to need. If you head on over to wattbike.com now and use code ROADMAN10, that's ROADMENTEN, and that's going to get you 10% off your Wattbike.
Okay, next question. Hi, Anthony. Is there a way that you can become better at riding to feel?
The ciclismo.
The ciclismo. I know you spoke about this on the podcast before, but after watching Pogačar, God, how many times are we going to take a shot every time we mention Pogačar in this podcast? After watching Pogačar ride with no data after having to swap his bike in stage 2 of the Giro, I was wondering if this is a skill that I can just learn. Any tips for fast tracking this? I feel like I'm too reliant on my Garmin for power and heart rate, and that's from Jude.
It's like when Luke Skywalker left to find Obi-Wan Kenobi. That's what you need to do. You need to get tuned into the ciclismo, to the power of the force, and you learn to understand it like Pogačar.
The force is with you, Jude. The force is with you.
I don't really love the power meter culture that we're in because I think everyone's forgotten how to pace stuff. Everyone's forgotten how to pace an effort, and it's something that it's like a muscle. You lose it with what's the word I'm looking for? Autophagy. If it atrophies, if you don't use it, so you need to build up these muscles. And you doing efforts without a power meter on is a lot of fun. And then retrospectively looking back at what it is, you do have access to a power meter. So like, there's marginal benefit on like why do you want to get good at pacing it in case your battery dies? Like,
I think it's probably just to be more of a in tune with your body, in tune with your effort. I would love to be able to do this. I haven't got the experience to do this either, but it's just to know, like I've spoken about this as well on the podcast a few times, that you will know within 5 watts what power and a couple of beats per minute where your heart rate is at, even if you're not looking at your bike.
But that's a different one. I think that's a more useful metric to understand. I think if you go out and you say, I want to understand how I feel, you're talking about the input rather than the output. And that seems like a subtle distinction, but it's like, what's your effort on a scale of 1 to 10? I think that's a better understanding. And then if you're doing, we're doing the local climb, which is roughly 7-8 minutes long. I know I need to be, if I want to try and break the record on that, I need to be an 8-9 out of 10 effort all the way up that. I know if I go to 10 out of 10, I'm not going to last. If I go high 9 out of 10 for too long, I'm going to be flooded. I have to hit 9 out of 10 towards the end of that effort. I think that's a much better idea than saying, I'm going to try and ride my local 10-minute climb at 450 watts and trying to gauge what 450 watts is without touching the 450 watts, because you're looking at the output there. There's many days where I get onto a hill to do an effort at 350 watts, but then I actually just don't feel capable of doing 350 watts. So that's why we're seeing the drift. Like the Dan Lorang podcast we put out last week, the head of performance at Border Hansgrove, he talks about how he coaches Roglic now, not using power anymore. He uses power as a metric to judge in retrospect, but all the efforts are off heart rate because it's how he feels. Wow. So everyone's going back that way. And John Wakefield was the podcast. Did it go out last Monday? And that's also another one, the Bora Hansgrove high performance team, talking about the role of heart rate and not power. So that seems like everything's drifting that way.
That is really interesting. I know that before I had a power meter, I felt more, I definitely took the time in my head to be more aware and in the moment and kind of think about what my perceived effort was. Now, we know perceived effort is kind of difficult for especially newbies to really judge properly. When we were in Colombia that time, when we were doing Alto de Letras, everyone just said to me, just write it 7 out of 10. I know parameter, no heart rate monitor, 7 out of 10. Up I flew, 7 out of 10 the whole day. And it's kind of wasn't a bad bit of advice.
You need a little bit of experience though to do that.
Yeah.
Like, because you remember when you got started at the very beginning, you used to ride a hill like absolutely full gas for the first 20 seconds.
9 out of 10, even though I would be thinking I'm probably at around 7 out of 10 here.
So you were like riding the hill at like 400 watts, and then fast forward 60 seconds, you're like at 100 watts and you're struggling to keep balance going forward. A lot of people fall into that trap. So it is good at the start. So I'm kind of contradicting myself, but I can get used to using understanding effort rather than input rather than output.
Okay, Anthony and Sarah, I recently started following my Garmin Forerunner's daily suggested workouts. It's a fantastic option, and Garmin software seems to mimic Seller's 80-20 principle quite closely, with a lot of base and lower heart rate rides, and then it hits you with really big efforts. It even adjusts and tweaks workouts based on your previous ride, sleep quality, stress levels, and overall energy expenditure. So far, it's been very impressive overall, with one major gripe I can't seem to come to terms with. It's suggesting very low heart rates rides for my base training rides, 105 to 110 beats per minute for anywhere from 1 to 3 hours. I can barely maintain this, it's so low. My max heart rate is 185, resting is 52. My question is, how low is too low? I understand the zone 2 concept and benefit, but wouldn't this be zone 1 for me, or 1.5 at best? Is there a benefit in training at such an excruciatingly low effort, or does Garmin have this completely wrong? Thanks, Tyler.
There's definitely a benefit at training at
excruciatingly low heart rates.
Yeah, in active recovery zones. There's a benefit of training in each zone. I think a lot of zones and a lot of the literature, mainstream literature, we've critiqued Peter Attia on the podcast saying he didn't know what he was talking about when he was talking about zone 2 running for beginners, which is virtually impossible to run in zone 2 if you've never ran before. Your heart rate's immediately into zone 3. But there's a set of physiological adaptations you get in each one of the zones. So if you're in recovery zone, which you actually are, so if you take... So let me deal with this in 2 parts. Let's talk about first the heart rate zones, because that's when he asked, and then more broadly about the Garmin training prescriptions. So there's 2 ways that you could calculate your heart rate zones at the moment. One is off your max heart rate, which you've given us. So off your max heart rate, your zone 1 would be 92 to 111. That's based off 50 to 60% of your max heart rate is your active recovery zone. So you're in your active recovery zone for these sessions. It doesn't seem to me, I don't know your goals and I don't know your training history, but it seems like they're long active recovery sessions. It seems like it's just misjudged your zone 2 endurance, which should be 60 to 70% of your max heart rate, which will be 111 to 129 for this rider. Who was it? Tyler?
Tyler, yeah.
A better way to calculate it was if you go back and listen to my podcast with Joe Friel, you might link that, Sarah, in the description below. Joe Friel talks about a 25-minute test for calculating your threshold heart rate. So his prescription is, he goes through exactly what warm-up you need. Then you do 25 minutes full gas as hard as you can. Now you talk about pacing and effort. That's like an 8 out of 10 effort. Best do it up the side of a climb if you can. And then you take the last 20 minutes of that 25-minute effort. You average it out. Let's say he hits 175 in that effort. And then you're going to take 68% of that lactate threshold heart rate, and that's going to be your under 68% of that's going to be your active recovery zone, and then you're going to have from 69 to 83% of that's going to be your zone 2. I think that's a more accurate way to set your zones rather than basing it off lactate of maximum heart rate. But a third way, which you don't talk about here, which is worth doing, is just getting into a lab. And Seller talks about this. What is your LT1? What is your LT2? What's that inflection point where you're no longer aerobic? And get those zones definitely nailed down. So I think your zones are wrong. Yes, so that answers the question. The second part of that's kind of, he's finding the Garmin Forerunner brilliant. I have a lot of hope for these type of apps, for AI style coaching apps to take in sleep quality, stress levels, total energy expenditure. The problem is if you put bad data in, you're going to get bad data out. And at the moment, some of the heart rate readings, like I'm getting wildly different readings using my heart rate for training app, which is kind of peer reviewed, the most accurate training app to use if you're going to do heart rate variability training in the morning. I'm getting very different readings off my Garmin Forerunner watch and off my Whoop than I am off my heart rate variability training app. So if you take the heart rate variability training app as the gold standard, the two of them have big problems at the moment. So then if it's giving you your training prescriptions off that, you're getting wrong prescriptions. I still don't think coaches are out of a job. I don't think these apps are there yet. I think there's a place for having a coach to assess this and build it out for you still if you're serious about your health and fitness goals.
Yeah, and if you're really serious about your training, Tyler, as well, why don't you treat yourself and go into the lab and actually get your numbers really, really strictly? Because doing the testing and these kind of, 60 to 70% of MHR, and why not just go and get tested and actually know if you're putting a lot of effort and time into training, then just go for it. That's what I would say.
Like there is, just to push back on that, the lab tests are brilliant, but also I used to get a little bit of almost performance anxiety around the lab test because you're stuck in an environment. I didn't ride indoor very often, so it recruits different muscles sitting indoor. You have a mask on, which is really uncomfortable, and I felt claustrophobic with it. You're like, you're top off, you're getting poked and prodded. I don't love needles. You're getting pinged with needles. Yeah. If I've always felt that if you have something that's replicatable, like you can test and then retest 6 weeks later and retest 6 weeks later, you're better off. I think the data you're going to get is very dependent on the type of person you are. If you're getting a little bit of that, meta stress from going into that environment, maybe it's not the one for you like I was. But yeah, also Sarah's advice is quite valid.
Okay, great.
Roadman, I'm going to date myself here, but I've been riding the bike for almost 20 years. And in that time, I've cycled through every cycling apparel brand out there. And I kept swapping out different apparel brands each season until I found LeCol. There's something really different about LeCol. And as soon as you slip into the gear, you notice it feels different. It feels better. I've had the pleasure of chatting with Yanto Barker on the podcast. He's the LeCol founder. And his dedication to crafting the fastest, most refined cycling apparel out there, it's nothing short of inspiring. Yanto isn't just trying to create gear. I get the feeling he's actively and obsessively trying to perfect cycling gear. Trust me, as soon as you slip on the LeCol kit, as soon as you zip up that jersey, you can feel that commitment. The proof for LeCol, it's in the pudding. This is the same kit that Jay Hindley wore when he clinched overall victory in the Giro d'Italia. There's a confidence that comes with wearing apparel that's been battle tested and podium proven in races like the Giro d'Italia. Trust me, feeling good on the bike means you're going to perform better. If you have a second, I highly advise you to jump on over to lecol.cc and check out their amazing range of kit and experience this feeling for yourself.
Okay, the next question, and this is from Scott, and Scott sent us in a picture. I'm gonna put this up in the video, and for the listeners, I'm going to describe a Smith bicycle helmet, and it has one of those little peaked visor on it. Yeah, it looks to me like a mountain bike helmet.
Yeah.
So basically, Scott says, I need to make this clear for myself. Is this helmet unacceptable to be riding on the road? And what if I'm riding a gravel bike? This is kind of like a style question, I think.
Ride it like. This is a stupid thing that's going on with cycling at the moment. That it's like, and we're just back from Girona, and it was infuriating me, this culture of you have to fit into this mold. And that's because every time you click onto any cycling website, or the whole industry is pushing this idea of what a cyclist has to look like. They have to wear a certain type of kit. They have to wear a certain type of sock length, shoes, bike. You don't. Cycling's inclusive. Get out with whatever helmet you have, whatever shoes you have, whatever kit you have. I'm actually tempted to just go the total opposite way and find like a bike from Aldi or something and start racing on it and just go, this stuff doesn't matter as much as we think it matters. It's nice to have nice stuff if you can afford it. But you don't need to put yourself in a position where you're feeling self-conscious about a helmet that looks perfectly fine. Like it looks like a nice helmet because it has a visor on it, like, and someone, that's invented rule says this isn't cool. It's very annoying.
We definitely need to change the culture around things like this. I know somebody came out on the group spin, on our group spin. I'm not sure. There might be a few kind of digs if you wore this helmet.
No.
I'm not sure. You might get a little bit of a ribbon over it. It is like traditionally more of a mountain bike helmet. Now, I'm not saying don't wear it, Scott. I'm just, being straight up with you. And yeah, I totally agree that we need... I'm just going to tell you, Scott, people are probably going to be talking behind your back. I'm not saying that that's
going to be you.
I know it won't be me because I'm totally with you. Listen, I've been over in Girona. I've been at bike races where, even though I spend a lot of time riding my bike, cycling is my business. I do this podcast now, and like all I do is talk about cycling all day. I've been in places like Girona, Majorca, and I felt like I don't belong there, that I'm not skinny enough, that I don't have the right kit, that my bike isn't, expensive enough, that I don't have the right shoes. And I wish that all of that would stop, because that's definitely pushing people out of the sport, making people uncomfortable. So, Scott, unfortunately, I think that if you wear this on the roads, you're definitely going to be getting a few looks. But who cares? The people who are giving you a few looks are, who cares about their opinion? They're wrong. They are wrong if they're judging you for wearing this. That's my tuppence.
Next question.
Okay. This is from Ben. Okay. Hey guys, I love the podcast and I love that you take questions from all levels of cyclists and cover all areas of cycling culture. Here's my question. I moved to a new city in Canada a few years ago and I've been riding with the club here ever since. I'm a mid-level rider and have made several casual bike friends through the club, which is very social. However, I'm finding it difficult to bridge that gap between making casual bike club friends and making more intimate real life off the bike friends. I'm a pretty social and outgoing person, but for some reason I'm finding it difficult to make that step with the cool people in the club. Do you have any tips for converting bike club friends into off the bike / real life friends? Thanks so much for all your help. Great knowledge, Ben.
So my only information I have on this, it's a lot of lads of my vintage will have read this book, The Game. It was about dating. It was about how you can...
Oh God, do you remember that?
You can get dates.
You'd be cancelled now for reading a book like that.
That was a great book. I'd really encourage everyone to read it that's single. Social penetration theory was the idea. It's not as dirty as you made it sound. So the idea of social penetration theory is that you build bonds with people based off the frequency of the interaction. So if we see each other more, so you're going into the same place that someone works all the time, you'll start to have common stories, common anecdotes you'll share with them. Remember the time X happened. So frequency is one thing. So if you keep going back out on the group ride, he's going to have more stuff to talk about. Remember the time Matt went over the handlebars? That was a gas day.
Oh God,
so you start having stuff like that to share. The second one is variety of setting. So if you see them in a group setting and then you see them in a work setting or you see them in a barbecue setting, it's the idea in a nightclub, if somebody starts talking to a girl, they'll often try and move that girl to a different, I'm just going over to talk to my friends the other side of the bar. Do you want to come with me? The idea being the psychology of moving them from setting A to setting B builds trust and builds a bond. And the third one is the emotional context of it. Emotional things like if you're on a cycling team and you're only just joined the new cycling team, but you lead someone out and they win the race and it's a big race. Emotional experience like that where you're all bought into it develops a strong bond. Similarly, defeats, like bad stuff like crashes, if you're in it together and you look after somebody in the aftermath of that builds an emotional. So it's frequency, variety of settings, and emotional depth are the three ways in the game if you want to get a date. And I would imagine if you want to get a friend.
And how do you do that in the club setting? So he's in the club.
He's not in the club in a nightclub. He's in the club.
In the bike club. Yeah. In the bike club setting. So do you want to do a bit of role play there, Anthony? You can. So I don't know. I think that that's all kind of that's kind of what happens and how the pressure points that you need to press in order to kind of make a bond. But how do you actually step outside the Saturday spin to something else? Now, you can, of course, you have this big shared interest. You could say, oh, I'll organise a barbecue or for all of the club
Yeah, but you've got to look at it like layers. So it's a bit weird if you organise a like if someone new showed up to our group ride, it's like, hey, I'm organising a barbecue. I'd be like,
Roadman
barbecue. This is clearly a trap. Like, I'm about to get abducted. So the frequency part matters. First, you can't skip that. You need to show up consistently. Like, think about one of the regular guys in Airspain. Jer comes around, he says, hey, I've got a barbecue for, you know, whatever big race going on. Last stage of the Giro d'Italia, I'm going to have a barbecue. You're like, oh,
I'll be there. I want to see Jer's house. Jer looks loaded. So, okay, but I think he has that sorted. I think he's been riding with these people really for a long time, but he wants to like move it on. He wants to get to second base with these.
Straight in, no kissing.
I think my advice would just be, really don't rush it. Like, don't
play it cool.
Play cool. Don't come across like too, you know, eager. Just as Anthony says, try and build like foundations.
If they text you, don't text them back for ages.
Flu tick. Oh, I'm really sorry, Ben. We have been absolutely no help with you at all.
It's more of a dating advice than anything really.
I think also make your peace that it just may not happen. I mean, naturally, these friendships outside of cycling should really happen. Potentially put into the group about going away for a cycling weekend. That would kind of get you away from your normal Saturday, Sunday ride. That's actually really good, because that's something that happens quite a bit, and that's a way, like, have some newer friends that I've only met this year for the first time, and it's because I've gone away on trips with them, and it's like a really compressed getting to know you window, because you're riding with them every day for 5-6 days, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey presto, now do you want to hang out and go for lunch off the bike, and now you have a good friend out of nowhere. Yeah, I think that's a really good suggestion. Maybe just a weekend away, or sign up for a race that's not in your locality, that you all kind of have to travel and stay in an Airbnb together. Yeah, look, as I said, just don't rush it. Don't follow them on social media and show up at the pub that they're drinking in every Saturday night randomly.
We're not talking about your dating advice anymore, Sarah.
But yeah, the best of luck with that, Ben. I hope it's helped a little bit. But yeah.
I think that's a wrap for this week.
Yeah, I think so.
Roadman, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Rider Support. Please keep the questions coming in. Sarah is available for dating advice, so reach out to her on X, and myself over on X as well. They're both linked down below. There's another video up here which I know you're going to love, and also please subscribe to the channel down there, because it helps us get bigger and bigger guests for the guest shows. Thanks for tuning in. Talk to you next week.